Okay, welcome to another Comp 1 2013 Programming Exam Solution tutorial. This is the second pest, and I'm going to do probably 2 or 3 of these validation examples. But before we start, I thought I'd do a quick overview of validation just to make sure you knew what we're talking about. So the aim is that we're going to recap validation techniques, and my assumptions are that you know the code, you've read the pre-relief, and you know what validation is. So the basic gist is that we're going to loop until we have a valid input, and this isn't obviously correct pseudocode, but the idea that we ask for an input and we just keep going around until that input's valid. The way we do this in .NET or VB.NET is I always have a boolean called valid, and I will set up my loop and I'll keep going around my loop until valid is equal to true. I actually of course don't need that valid equal to true. I could just have it equal to valid because that's a boolean expression, so I could just have loop until valid, but I put that there just for clarity. And effectively I start off by saying the valid equals to false, get my input, have my logical expression, my boolean expression there. If that's true, make valid equals true, otherwise make valid equal to false. Of course it's polite to put some kind of use of feedback to tell them why it's false, and that would always sort of that would always work, that system. Whatever you're going to put in there, if you've got this sort of structure of making a valid equal to false, having your input, having your if statement which sets the boolean to either true or false, and then a loop to go back round if it's false, is always going to work. Of course we're going to test it. We're going to be wanting to use this thing called typical erroneous extreme testing. This is what the exam board would be expecting. You should expect that they will ask you to test it. So for this particular example, because I've just asked for a number between 1 and 10, obviously 1 and 10 would be typical values. Erroneous, something that would definitely throw an invalid, in fact it would throw an exception, would be something like Bob. I guess 100 or 50 would also be erroneous in this case, and extreme is going to be the numbers 1 and 10 because they're just at the logical boundaries of validity. Okay, so let's have a quick run of this code, and I'll enter 100, which is obviously erroneous, and you can see it brings back. Ideally we'd step through this, but let's keep it nice and quick. Let's put in Bob, and what we're going to get is an exception thrown, and it's an invalid cast because I can't put a string into an integer. It just doesn't work. So when we're testing, that's a bit of a pain. So what we need to do is also put in a type check, and in order to do that we use the try-catch system. So this is available in most programming languages, but the way it works in VB is that everything between the try and the catch will be effectively tried, and if an exception's thrown, this will be sort of backtracked to there, and it will run everything between the catch and the end try. So basically it's an if statement that says if there is an exception here, then run this. So if the code crashes here, if there's a runtime error, then run this code. So it's a way of, it's pretty good. The times you're going to use it are when doing calculations where the calculation might throw an error, obviously inputs, or reading in or writing to or from files. Those are the times where try catches become really, really useful. So I'll just show you how that works. Okay, I've added this in and rerun the code. I'm not going to bother stepping through it, but Let's try 100 again. Clear, that doesn't work. Bob. I can enter whatever I like in now, because this will always get run. Let's put in 10, because that would be a nice extreme value, and the code finishes. So we have looked at the basic idea of having a loop with an input within the loop and a Boolean expression to check it. Obviously, you need to make sure that this expression is actually is performing the task you want it to, that you're not getting any logic errors. But in terms of validating, this structure you can see in front of you now, this little area here, is how it's always going to work. If you've got multiple validation statements, as long as it's just 2 or 3, I'll just create a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger Boolean expression. If it gets really unwieldy, you can always put that expression on multiple lines to make it clearer. You can start to nest your ifs, but that is going to make it trickier. My advice is always stick it in one if statement. Right, hopefully you found that validation overview useful, and 2B will be validating the Caesar cipher.